Welcome back to Identiverse 2025. It is time for day 2 wrap-up with Jackie McGuire. How you doing, Jackie?
Hello. I am fantastic. I am very tired, but I am excited to visit the Sphere for the first time tonight, so I'm trying to second wind it and get through day 2. How are you?
Very cool. So that's where the show is. You're going to see
Yes.
Kenny Chesney.
That is the only reason I would go see Kenny Chesney.
Yeah.
No offense to Kenny Chesney. It's just not typically my choice of music to go see proactively.
Me
but
neither. You guys asked me if I wanted to see Kenny Chesney. I said no. The Sphere was not mentioned.
Yeah.
My answer might have been different if
Yeah,
I knew it was in
yep.
the Sphere.
I feel I was not responsible for that.
I feel gypped now. No, it's
You're
fine.
not supposed to say that anymore.
I'm not doing anything tonight except grabbing some dinner and resting up.
You have had a long day today.
I just counted. I did 10 interviews today. It was supposed to be 9. We had one last-minute addition to the roster.
Yeah.
And we made it through all of them. And thank you to Tyson for being so gracious and patient with me.
Yeah.
With me pounding the table.
Yeah. Yeah. We have a wobbly table, so I don't know how
Well,
hard
it's
you
the
can pound
microphone.
it. Oh shoot.
Yeah.
Uh-oh. Yeah.
I can't hear it because I'm not hearing what's coming through the mic, but Tyson sure can.
Oh, you're so problematic.
So I had a lot of 10 conversations today, 10 15-minute interviews.
Did you learn
15
anything?
minute doesn't sound like a lot, but
It is.
as I do with most things, I went a little bit long on all of them.
I don't believe that. We always end Enterprise Security Weekly on time. Every week.
Never
I think
once.
there's been one single time. There was one time that one segment we ended like exactly on time, and I was like, "Whoa!" It's like seeing a unicorn in person.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I did learn some things.
Yeah.
As you can imagine, with 10 different interviews, I mean, it helps that it's all on identity, right?
Yeah.
When we're at RSA or Black Hat, you could at RSA this year, I talked about executive security
Yeah.
with somebody, and then the next discussion was about vulnerabilities in LLMs when using different languages. Like
Yeah, and then it's
apparently the
post-quantum encryption.
Yeah,
and
right?
Yeah, it's really
so
hard
at
to-
least this was all at least tangential to identity. Like
Yeah.
it was still very different. Like the last conversation I just had with Aware was about biometrics and largely centered around physical security.
Okay.
But still identity related.
Yeah.
A lot of it, we talked about more AI than I thought we were going to talk about, but figuring out how to do authentication and identity for agentic stuff is kind of up in the air at the moment.
Whether
Right.
at the workload level or at the service level or at the agent level or
Nobody had a super strong answer on how to do it. So there's a lot of talk about, well, it depends on the use case, right?
Yeah.
Like, so you've got this problem of everybody is at some point in their zero trust journey, which is, zero trust, principle of least privilege on everything, including access to data. But then for these agents to be useful, you want to give them as much access as you possibly can.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? The more you restrict their access to data and systems and stuff like that, the less useful they're going to be.
Yeah.
So how do you tackle that?
Well, and it's just like the same thing happens with people, right? So I can do my job better with access to more data, but there's a way to have a conversation with that person about why they need access to
Yeah.
data and justification, and you don't get that with an agent. And the velocity at which things can go sideways with agents is so much greater because they're immediately making decisions, and within 10 seconds, you have the equivalent of 15 human errors.
So one of the things we talked about, I'm not 100% sure which conversation this was at this point, but we talked about, how you kind of, this might have been Brightive, where I was talking to them about it, and you really have to, in every single case, figure out what that agentic workflow looks like.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like how we address SQL injection is use prepared statements. You shouldn't be able to just in an abstract way query a data store.
Yeah.
Right. It should be. There's specific things you're going to need in that use case, and you limit it to those specific things.
Yeah.
So mean, it's going to be hard to scale and build fast when you're doing that for every single one of those agentic workflows. So I think one or two things happen. It's kind of like SOAR, where everybody, SOAR, we're going to automate everything, but it takes 6 months to build a single SOAR workflow and get it working properly. So you end up building, half a dozen or a dozen agentic workflows because it takes so long to get it working correctly, to secure it, to do all that.
Yeah. Well, I always think about a hospital with agents. So same thing at a hospital, right? Is like the way you would identify and secure things varies from employee to employee at the hospital and what they're doing, right? So with nurses, because they have access to controlled medicine, there's a special place where that medicine's stored, and then you have to, authenticate or sign in or whatever. But the receptionist checking people in, like they have access to sensitive data. It's PII, but they don't have access to opiates. So it's like a combination of, is it the job that's important that they're doing currently? So like the workload-based identity. And if you're an organization where your workloads are identical most of the time, you probably don't need an identity for each of those workloads. But if you have agents that are, to your point, making these kind of probabilistic decisions, then maybe those workloads do vary enough that you want them each to have a specific identity to be able to track them. And I think it goes, to your point, it goes back to what are the agents actually doing as functions of your organization, and at what level is that going to vary where you would need to monitor it to look for that variance.
And I think a hospital is a great example because access control and roles are very well defined and documented. So I think that would actually be one of the easier places to do that than just general enterprise stuff. I feel like in a lot of enterprise organizations, nobody's taking the time to do that. Because people's lives aren't at stake. There aren't the components to make meth available.
Well, there's no regulation, and that's the thing is that security just absolutely is crippled by a lack of regulation. And I think for most people, at the engineer level, if you ask them, do we need more regulation? Entrepreneurs are like, no, we don't want. But the lack of that guidance and framework, it does. It slows you down. And I was talking right before we started recording about it's great that this is all identity focused. It's a little bit disheartening to walk around an identity conference and be like, all right, there's 30 different marketing messages that all contradict each other. Like, why are we all running in separate directions? Why can't we say, okay, in healthcare applications, we need to run this way? And, we could be so much more prescriptive, and we just have none of that in security, and nobody wants to do it because it's not a light lift, right? It's like zero trust. I hate the term zero trust because you're never going to get to zero. And I think just the term in and of itself is overwhelming for people when they're like, I'm never going to get to that, and like that's.
Yeah, and I think it's somewhat misunderstood. I think it was intended to mean start from zero.
Yeah. And
instead of start from all the access and whittle down, you start from zero and only add what's needed. I don't think the intent is to go to zero. Right.
Well, but it's to get everything to zero trust, right? And you start with users, and then you go to, like locations, and like there's zero trust for all different things. But I think the term in and of itself implies this, like, you're going to get to this place where you have full control and, zero gaps because nobody's allowed to do anything.
An impossible standard.
Yeah, exactly. And like zero trust is actually more of kind of a continual process of,
a philosophy too. Like it's something you always want to be thinking about when giving somebody privileges, because it's just not the way we did things in the past. It was just like, whatever needs to happen, Chmod 777 to get everything working. There are things you can do. Everyone full control on a file share.
Well, and everybody had a tower
Anyone
at
with
their
the link.
desk. And I even remember like being freaked out when I got a laptop to take home. I was like, I don't want this data at my house. Like when everybody had a tower at their desk and you just put a firewall around everything, you could have access to everything. Because what were you going to do with it? You couldn't take it outside the moat around the castle, so it wasn't dangerous.
So, there were a lot of interesting conversations. One I thought was interesting. I didn't realize Exonius actually had like a business accelerator like within the company called Exonius X, which I blank on the name of the company now. Exonius required them, but they were competing with Bromium and Vincia.
Yeah.
Invincia did something similar where they also had kind of this skunk works that, we're trying to come up with new products in-house. And that actually led to their successful pivot, which led to their acquisition by Sophos. So always interesting when a startup has a startup factory within it.
Yeah.
Right? Especially once you get to a certain size. And it makes sense with Exonius, because Exonius is like, okay, we built 1,000 connectors to integrate with other products. We built this data model where we're normalizing, bringing all the security data into one place. Now, what can we sit on top of that from a product perspective?
Yeah.
So you almost have to have this kind of idea factory within the company to see what you can do there. And we were specifically talking about the identity side of it that they're tackling right now.
Yeah, and I think, having been in rapid growth organizations before, generally engineering people hire people they know in, right? And so you sometimes then end up in your general engineering org with a bunch of people who came from the same handful of places, and so they're used to doing work specific ways. And I think setting up one of those within your company is a really great way to make sure that not everybody is in that kind of group think, like, well, of course this is the way we're going to do this. Of course this is the way we're going to do that. Because I've seen that be a significant impediment to innovation in places where if you just put a couple scrappy people and disconnect them and let them decide how things should be on a blank canvas, I think if you can afford to do that, it's a really, really good way to not end up building your branded version of the company you recruited half your engineers from. Because we see that a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. It ends up being smoothed out into everything else.
Yeah.
Something that just looks like everything else. Yeah, and it's, crossing the chasm. There have been, what's his name? Christensen has written books about it. There's a lot of, it's a tough problem, growing a company and keeping that kind of innovative spirit going there. I also learned Kubeless has free single sign-on and MFA.
Yeah, I went over and did an analyst briefing with them today as well. So they're kind of trying to be like Okta for everybody, right? So like Okta for small and mid-sized businesses. They've got this interesting freemium model that they're working on. So,
and I was like, so what's the monetization strategy? And he was like, I don't know yet.
Yeah.
So that was interesting. But I guess it makes sense. Like once you build this freemium model, you onboard a lot of folks. Like the data they're going to get out of that maybe informs what they charge for, what premium services that they put together. But I love the fact that they're starting with the stuff that other companies are charging extra for.
Yeah.
Right? The SSO tax, you got to be in the enterprise tier. You can't be at the small business tier or the pro tier if you want single sign-on, right? So it's kind of cool that they've flipped that model.
Yeah, and
and that's the free product.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see. The one recommendation I made is, hey, having come from vendors who do freemium stuff, as you go to transition your customers to paying customers, you have to be ready to stand up professional services alongside your freemium model, because once people do write that check, everything from there needs to go really well.
Yeah.
Because if they've been using your product for free and then they write a check and then all the extra things that come with that check start causing issues, it's not a great experience. So that was and I think
smooth transition.
Yeah, and just professional services in general. Like I think for most SaaS companies, that's going to be table stakes going forward. I think a lot of companies have tried to use, third parties and channel partners and things like that, and you just lose control of your customer experience. Do you remember when Medium started charging for stuff? Yeah.
So the way they did that, I think is a great example of how not to do it, in that the way they announced it, it sounded like everything on Medium was from one day to the next behind a paywall.
Yep.
And you needed a subscription, when what actually happened is every individual person on Medium had the choice of whether to put up a paywall or not.
Yeah.
And they could even do like a hybrid of both. They could have free articles and paid articles. But because the announcement made it seem like everything was behind that paywall, I knew a lot of people that just wouldn't even click Medium links anymore.
Yeah.
Because they were like, I'm not going to subscribe to it, so I probably can't read this. When most of the time, a lot of that stuff was still free.
Yeah.
So, like, I think that was kind of a case study of how not to do it.
Yeah, and how like messaging is everything, right? Because there's a big difference between, hey, like you're going to have to pay for some content now, and hey, we've come up with a great new way to give creators control over the revenue that they generate. And, like for creators you really support, we have a great new way for you to, support the work that they do. And I think New York Times, I listen to a lot of their podcasts, and that's how they frame subscribing is like, hey, here's a sneak peek into all the work that goes into some of the stories we report. Here's why you should pay as a subscriber, because this is what you're helping. And so, yeah, I think part of that was just kind of botched messaging in general, and like not focusing more on what Medium was getting out of it than enabling creators to keep creating in a better fashion.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's. I wish the whole industry went for a different model. That it was more of a, like Brave had a great idea. They created the basic attention token, and the idea is you would load up your browser with $50 a month or something like that, and based on what websites you visited, those people would get paid automatically behind the scenes just by the fact that you went and visited that website, and. That solves the problem of, this is the only LA Times story I'm going to read this year probably.
Yeah.
It does not make sense for me to subscribe to read a single story. I wish that could have caught on. I would have been fully on board with that. But, I'd like to know what that would have looked like. But, oh well. So tomorrow we start at 10 a.m. Pacific. We're gonna open it up. I assume you're still gonna be here with me.
Assuming I survive the Sphere and Kenny Chesney, I will. I can't guarantee what I will look like when I get here, but I will be here. I may be a steaming pile.
Jackie will be here in some form. And tomorrow we just have one interview left with SDG Corporation. And then we're going to do Enterprise Security Weekly live.
I am so excited for this.
Yeah.
I'm excited for the guest. I'm excited to be able to do it live.
Tell us about the guest.
All right, so Tina's coming on, and she is the co-founder of Badge. And Badge is doing some really cool things with biometric verification that doesn't require you to store that data on endpoints. So it's significantly more complicated than that. But I'm excited because Tina is one of me. So like I'm the person that's like the weaponized autistic ADHD that just like I have to conquer all the things, and her interest in like experience that we'll talk about tomorrow is as diverse as mine, which I love. So it's gonna be fun. I'm really excited.
Perfect teaser. Don't say anything more than that.
Nothing else.
It's gonna be a great conversation. I'm really looking forward to it. The more you tell me about Tina, the more excited I get for the conversation tomorrow.
She's like my new favorite person. I won't lie.
And that's all we've got for you today. So this is wrapping up day 2 of Identiverse 2025. And we will be back here on CyberRisk TV tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. Pacific.